Welcome to the Indiewood podcast. My name is Yaro. We wanted to do this podcast because we wanted to explore the ins and outs of independent film and the many hats that indie filmmakers wear in order to make their movies. Because while we all want to be Hollywood, we first have to be Indiewood.
That's fun.
Right? I wrote that this morning.
I love that.
But making indie films is hard, which is where this podcast comes in. Each month, I'll be joined by a guest host from a different filmmaking discipline. Indiana here is from cinematography. And we'll talk about the craft, learn things that are crucial to the filmmaking process, and discover how all the different hats we wear can make or break a project. I am a writer and director. I have been doing production for 15 years. I've been editing for 20 years. And I have a master's degree from UCLA in screenwriting. So with me, I have Indeana Underhill, a cinematographer from Canada. Mm-hmm. Can you give me a little bit more about your background?
Of course.
You do? What are your accolades? What are your cool stories?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll keep it short. We won't have the
you
cool
have two
stories
sentences.
in there. Okay, got it. Indie for short, and co-founder of Cinematography For Actors, originally Canadian, based in LA now for about 5 years. And we're here at the CFA studio, which I'm very proud of to have hosted this Indiewood podcast, because I think what you're doing is great.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'm associate member CSC, shot over 40 things. I think I have 40 credits thus far, and a lot of music videos, a lot of narrative. Graduate from AFI, cinematography fellow, and have traveled to over 35 countries, shooting in about a dozen of them.
Oh, yeah.
And majority of it being in the Middle East. That's 3 or 4 sentences for you.
I'll take it.
Okay, great.
When I think about independent film, I think about, projects under a certain budget amount. But by definition, an independent film is anything made outside the studio system, which at this point is fairly small. We have Warner, Universal, Paramount. And I think we can count Amazon and Apple and Netflix. I mean, technically they're studios. I'm sure I'm missing a couple ones, but they buy each other up all the time. It's hard to tell who owns who anymore. And so technically anything made outside of the studio system is an independent film. And that can range from like the movie you make in your backyard with your buddy for $5 to a festival darling to, a $10 million film financed by, dentists.
Yeah. Which we're seeing. We've met those people. We've met the dentists and lawyers and
that's so interesting.
Private equity people who are actually like executive producing, EPing on stuff.
That's so interesting.
Which is really funny to watch and like introduce them to the industry in a cool way. Yeah.
Well, I think this is what this podcast is for. It's for those people that are making films outside of the studio system, and I would say maybe under a certain budget level, because people that work with 20, 30 $1 million, they know how to make movies. But as we explore the different sides of independent film, who does what, and at times who does how many things all at once, hopefully we'll give you some insight into how to make better movies.
I'm really excited about it because Yaro, to give Yaro kind of a lot of credit here, is he is a wealth of knowledge and information.
Thank you.
The best directors know how all the other different departments work, or should, I hope. And so, I think because of your background in screenwriting, as well as working with No Film School and knowing a lot of the vendors and brands, you're in a really special spot of having a cool set of skills that can diversify into many different interviews that are going to be had on the podcast, starting with me.
I appreciate you saying that. I think anybody who comes to the pod, I'm going to ask them to say something nice about me.
Oh, honestly, affirmations, we love it, whether they're self or others. Let's get into affirmations more often.
So I have a question for you. My biggest question, because we haven't worked together.
Not yet.
Fingers crossed. I think there's something in the works. But the one thing I noticed about your workflow is you go out of your way to not operate a camera. And I think in the independent film world where, directors are also their writers, are also their DPs, are also their editors, it's interesting to be like, no, I'm a director of photography, but I don't operate a camera. And so why?
It's so funny the way you put it too, because it's like you go out of your way to not operate, and it's true to actually an extent, and it's funny to hear it being said like that, because I just have to like soak in the truth there. But Yes. So out of like the 40 credits I say that maybe 80% of them I have an operator on. And that doesn't mean I have the budget to have an operator. But we find that budget somewhere. The reason I do it is because film is a collaborative art form, and I got in trouble when I got into film when I was 15 from an art teacher who was pairing me up as a cinematographer on my first project. And I said, well, I want to direct and I want to DP and I want to produce. And she goes, you can't. And I was like, why? And she's like, because film is collaborative and you need other people in order to tell the story better. And after throwing my little fit with that art teacher, she was right. Miss Badali, who's now retired and built a garden in her backyard. Fun fact. So what was great about that lesson was that I realized collaboration is not just HODs, heads of department, but it's also the crew that work with you. And I know I tell better stories when I am able to delegate and streamline my workflow. And a lot of streamlining that workflow is having the right people in place. The way I look at it is that I want to support the director as much as possible. I'm normally one of the first people they go to, if not the actor or the AD. And I want to know exactly on these tight budgets where we have to go next. And so if I have my gaffer and key grip running that department and I'm able to delegate those notes out, I should have on camera side someone to delegate those notes out so that we can make our day. And I think that allows me to work really quickly as a DP as well, which is cool. I will operate, but I prefer having someone there that is focused on or managing that frame at all times, where I'm not jumping from giving notes to someone or talking to you as the director or my PD on set and then going over to camera last minute, jumping on and being like, let's go for it.
I think it's important. I think it's important to give yourself space and time to not only collaborate with the folks you're working with, but also make sure that every task you're doing is what's the word I'm looking for? Not disciplined. Dedicated? No.
I mean, it's both of those things.
Deliberate.
But Deliberate. That's the perfect word.
Yeah. Because, I've done work where I was on camera and then jumped off to talk with a filmmaker I was collaborating with and then jumped back on camera to fine tune things. And it gets really hard to be creative with intention. But sometimes you might need to do that. Sometimes you might need to be like, hey, look, it's me and you, and we got to get this done, and it's going to be fun. Let's have a good time. So I guess my follow-up to that would be, how does that approach work in a setting where you just can't have a lot of people and you have to wear many hats?
I mean, I think then you wear many hats. I think, I would probably caution the director, depending on the number of people on set and what their experience level is. I would probably caution the director and the producer and AD and say, if you want X amount of setups a day, we're going to have to look at where that I'll highlight things on my shot list where orange shots mean what we could possibly cut or merge or combine. So the AD and the director and the PD always have that with them. And so I probably am more realistic then about the setups that we can accomplish and not over-promising. And that's kind of, I think, what happens if you reduce the number of people on set to an extent where every department isn't fully supported. If it's a budget factor, I have like reduced shoots by a full day because I've been able to guarantee that we can do X amount of setups. And that's saved production money, but I could also hire an operator. And that streamlines the workflow. So I think it's just like working with the different HODs in order to figure out what works best for the film and the director.
I like that. I don't think I've ever thought about cutting things and combining things in that way to help schedule. As someone who's wrote and directed some of my work and some of others, I've always been like, oh no, the story is key. Like, it's important for the story to have this scene.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I feel like from other people's perspective who don't have, I don't want to say skin in the game because everyone should, but maybe someone who isn't as close to the material, they can be more objective and be like, oh, hey, this one scene of a couple talking and this other scene of a couple talking could be one scene of a couple talking.
Right.
And then you save time and money.
And I think it's that, but I think it's also like, if I look at how many setups are in a scene and I look at, I know we've spoken about this, that I like to work in dogmas. So I have a dogmatic approach to every part of my process. So, when we're breaking down a script, it's a lot easier when you have rules around it and when to break those rules, how it's going to happen, what those rules change to. And so when I talk about like combining and merging, it's less, I think, scene wise, and it's more, okay, we have 12 setups in the scene. What rules are we adhering to? Are we ticking the box of all of them? And if we are, why do we have these 4 shots still? Is this something that we can lose if we don't have the time on set? It's not me saying no to things. It's more like, okay, if we're down to the wire and, you know, we have 30 minutes left before wrap, what are we going to be able to get? And what's the most important for us to tell the story?
Do you think those are issues that come from a lack of planning or a lack of budget, or it's something that maybe isn't refined in the script, and so when you get on set, you're like, this is too busy, we're just shooting things that may or may not need to be kind of a part of the story?
Yeah, it's I think it's dependent on, and everything in this industry is always like, it depends when you're in a panel, but I think it's dependent on the type of person that's leading the set. I think you made a first-time director joke, which is funny because it is accurate, I would say, with the like, what do you think? Because people are looking for experience and support, and they're in a very vulnerable space. And a lot of that, what do you think, is me reassuring them that it's a safe space in my answer. And so if it's about lack of, you know, time or money, I think that's very different to a first-time director who probably doesn't know how to navigate a shot list yet, or knows what they want out of it from references and visual design, but doesn't know how they actually need to achieve it, and is worried about getting into the edit and being like, I don't have enough to cut this scene together, so I need backup options. And it's important to have safety, but it's also important to understand like how many days you have, what your budget is, and what you can expect of people. And yeah, so I think it depends on how experienced that director is that's leading the set.
It is a world of it depends, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Here's a follow-up. What things do you expect to have a director ready? Between a shot list, storyboards, you know, I know some folks even don't even bring a screenplay. They're like, here's an outline, let's go have a good time. So what is your expectation from a director, and does it change from when you're working on something that's low budget to something that's, you know, over $1 million?
I don't think my expectations would ever change, because it's a way of, I try and be very efficient and streamline every process. And that doesn't mean rush it. I think that just means like, let's be smart about what we're doing, because no matter if you have $1 million or you have $1, people are going to try and stretch that and make it look higher than it is. I just interviewed for this week for $1 million project that I would shoot in the summer, and you know, that director had the exact same notes about the directors I work with that have $25,000, and that's, we just have to make it look like it's worth a lot more. Yeah. And it's because at the end of the day, you're making it for an audience, and that audience has such high expectations now of the content that's delivered to them, whether it be through user-generated content or socials, or like the actual documentary. Documentaries have a higher standard now, resolution-wise, and like how things are shot and aesthetic, and I think, you know, your audience, in order to sell it to producers or distributors or sales agents, you have to have that higher value. And so I think that plays into a lot of my decision making as a DP on like, if that's our end goal, how do we attain that? And we need to streamline the workflow in order to do so.
I like that approach. I think, you know, for me, it's been a lot of rushed work in the past. There has been a lot of rushed work in the past. Yeah,
of course.
And it's like, okay, well, we'll just do it on set. You know, I'll wing it. And you know what? It's worked a couple times, and sometimes it hasn't. And, you know, there are happy accidents that can come from that. Yeah. But,
and to add to like what the physical items I need, like whether it's shot list or storyboard, I have rarely worked with directors that actually do storyboards. I think I've worked with 2 that come and they're like, I've boarded this out. And I'm like, okay, cool. We worked with, for a virtual production shoot I just did that you covered for No Film School, we had a storyboard artist block everything out for the more difficult shots. And that was because you can't change the world once it's built on a short notice, on a stage, on a virtual production stage or LED volume. But rarely do I have directors board things out, because I don't work commercial. And so I always expect them to come with an idea of what story they want to tell. I don't expect them to come with a shot list. I expect to build that with them, because I want to know it as a second language. I want to be in their head when we're on set, and I want to be able to anticipate if something goes wrong, what world we're working in, where I can develop a shot for you that suits that story and doesn't feel out of place in the edit. And so all I expect from directors is to be kind, considerate of other people's ideas, but also know what they want. You can have a last minute change and change your mind, but it has to be motivated. So everything anyone does in our industry needs to be motivated by telling that same story that the director wants, including the director. They need to support that they're like, this is my vision, and this is the aesthetic I want, and this is the story I want to tell, and it's this person who's the protagonist. And I think as long as we can adhere to like that form or that term sheet, then we're kind of groovy, and I can supply the rest of the knowledge we need where needed.
I like that. Mm-hmm. You mentioned about making a project look better than it is for the value.
Yes.
It brought me back to two films, two recent films that got nominated for an Oscar.
Congrats.
The Creator.
Yes.
And
I thought you were saying that I worked on it. I was like, congrats. I didn't know this. Let's celebrate you. You got nominated for two Oscars, my friend?
No.
Okay. Got it.
Someday. So The Creator and Godzilla -1.
Yeah.
So both films that look a lot bigger and more expensive than they are, but worth, a fraction of the cost. Allegedly, Godzilla -1 is $15 million and looks, 100? And then
Creator's 80
and looks 150.
Yeah.
And I think the importance of stretching that dollar, whether you're working on something that's $25 or $25 million, is important. And coming in with intention, coming in with everything kind of planned out, but with room for improvement, I think is important. I think that is very valuable. And sometimes I'll go into a project without that and kind of try to wing it on set, and it doesn't always work.
Well, I think it's because in your mind, you're like, I know exactly what I want, but then in everyone else's mind, they're like, how do we get there? Do I have the right supplies? How can I support him?
Yeah.
And I think the pressure then gets added on to the HODs. It's funny you bring up The Creator because we're doing a workshop with Disability Film Challenge next week at Sony, and I was just emailing with Oren, one of the
producers,
one of the DPs.
Oh, sorry, the DPs, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just want to say that as we're talking about all this and we're talking about collaboration, he has always been someone on Cinematography Salon on Facebook who has been one of the most educational people on there, always answering the technical, always supporting the community. And it's so wonderful to see people in their journeys, and also that knowledge pays off, because he made a film look, from an $80 million budget to $200 million. And I think it's because he's so tied into the community and so tied into the constant progression of knowledge you need in this industry to use the tools that are coming out. It
feels like going to school just to kind of keep up with everything that's going on, and being the tech editor for No Film School. I feel like I'm having to, and I used to do this before, where I would just wake up in the morning and be like, what's new? What's happening in the world? And now I'm kind of like the creator of that, which is kind of fun. But keeping up with it is difficult because everyone has a weird innovation, and everyone's trying to sell something as an innovation when it hasn't really been innovated on.
Lenses.
Yeah,
like catch up with lenses all the time.
We have this new lens that's blah blah blah. It's like, well, they made it in the 50s, and you're just kind of copying a design that's been in the public domain. Not trying to rat anybody out. And I did though talk with a major lens company recently. Not to segue too much, but it's a lens company that makes very expensive lenses. And we discussed kind of what this influx of affordable cinema glass is doing to the market. And it's really changing how we look at the tools we need. And it's difficult now, I think, for companies to make very expensive products even for the niche market, because everybody wants to get into it,
Well, as you know, and I didn't mention at the beginning, I come from a lens background.
You do.
Building lenses with Hawk. And it's interesting because they have a very niche market. They're some of the most expensive glass on the market. And they're the most expensive glass to rent and purchase. For rental houses, it's a hard investment. They also don't sell to everyone. And then for DPs, it's like sometimes a dream lens, because it's just it's like up to $1,000 a day lens sometimes.
That's insane. Which
is wild. And for people who are listening but don't know, lenses range from 150 to maybe 500 if you're getting into anamorphic territory. So that's
1,000.
But we're at 1,000 for Hawk. 750 to 1,000, depending on what it is. And when I was working there, they're all about brand, and they're about we're bespoke, and we only make X amount of sets, and it's never going to be a factory, and there's only 2 people in the basement making those lenses. And
it feels very Black Magic, doesn't it? Because with Black Magic, they have like 2 guys working on Resolve.
I didn't know that.
Well, don't quote me on it. I think maybe there's more people now. But
Yeah.
at one point, it was like 2 engineers. Like, oh, we're going to go fix some bugs.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Speaking of bugs, do you know why they call it bug fixing?
No.
So back in the day when people made really rudimentary memory, it was copper wires that connected, were pinched together by circles of some sort of metal. It escapes me.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, you had people kind of build this weird large network of wires that would connect and make memory, right?
Okay.
And the problem is you'd have moths that get in there. So people would actually go in and clean out these moths and clean out these bugs. And so that's what I call bug fixing. That's why I call them bugs.
That's really fun.
Right?
That's also like, imagine like you're interviewing for a job and they're like, a lot of your job is going to revolve around
bugs.
Like cleaning moths. Like I wonder how that would but anyway, that's cool. Wow.
Not to digress even further.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love a fun fact. Now for Indiewood, when you had the idea for it, and like at CFA, the company I co-founded with Haley Royal, who's sitting behind our camera over there with Jack.
Hello.
We are all about bridging the gap between talent and crew. And the reason I loved the idea for Indiewood because you were like, let's bridge the gap between departments and have people better understand each other. And so what can we expect to get into for my co-hosting?
So for this month, I wanted to see what we could do with things that you weren't comfortable with.
Okay, cool.
And when we talked earlier about this kind of season, quote unquote, the next 4 episodes, we talked about screenwriting, color grading, and music. And so I think for the next couple episodes, we'll explore all these things and more, see what I know and what you know and how we can combine these things to make better movies.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's like definitely a necessary, this is like a necessity within the podcasting world and also our industries, because the way we tell better stories is being on the same page. And so understanding how we do that, I think is what you're answering. And that's what I'm really excited about.
I've always been a weird nerd that liked a lot of things. Like recently I've gone into machining. Like cool. I'll go and like watch a bunch of videos about people like making stuff on lathes. There's a guy out of Australia who's like he's remaking the Antikythera mechanism, if I pronounce that correctly, which is like this 3,000-year-old mechanical computer, and he's making everything. He's making the tools to then make the parts as they would have been made 3,000 years ago. It's fascinating.
That's wild.
And so this weird like ADD thing that I have where I just need to learn things, and I just like love like, filling my buckets of knowledge with like random stuff, has led me to this place where I have been an editor. I have been a director of photography. I've been a director. I've now fairly trained as a screenwriter. I've done the props. I've gripped. I've been a sound mixer. I've been a sound recordist on set.
Yeah.
What's the credit for
recordist mixer?
Sound recorder, sound mixer. Yeah. It's sound mixer, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Boom op. There we go.
It's one of the ones we're gonna have to dive into. Apparently, yeah.
And I think that's what kind of made me attracted to this job at No Film School and this podcast, because it's like I can share that with a lot of people and continue growing my knowledge base.
Yeah.
And I think the importance of having cross-discipline knowledge, especially in filmmaking, especially in independent film, is so invaluable, because I've met folks that are like, oh, hey, I'm going to send you this cut of the film, and I want your expertise on it or whatever, or you please cut this film, and they'll cut it and they'll do things that may necessitate the need for someone in VFX, someone in sound, someone in color, but they're like, oh, I don't do that, I just edit.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool, I don't have the budget for half of those people.
Yeah.
So
maybe next time when I have the budget, I'll come back, but it's not going to work. Yeah.
Why did you do the things that necessitate the need for hiring those extra people when I can't afford it?
Yeah.
And so I think as we talk with each other, and as we talk with more folks, from composers to directors to writers to people that have done everything under the sun. I want to explore what really makes an independent filmmaker. And I think it's the person who not only can wear multiple hats, but can understand what other hats are doing.
Cool.
And in this case, hats are disciplines.
Yes, it really is. I will, before we wrap up this episode, I want to tell you an idea I had for a short film. Okay. Because I'm never going to direct or write. And
you know what? That's going to be an amazing end to the podcast.
Fun segment.
You pitch a short.
Yeah.
You pitch your film idea.
I'm going to pitch it to you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I had it last night while on my 5 milligram gummy. So, okay, so it starts with, it's going to be very relatable. I hope. It starts with a girl in the bath on her phone with like one candle, and it's like almost completely dark, and she has like the shower curtain pulled, and she's lying down in the bath, and it's like there's like barely any bubbles. It's kind of a sad bath. You can tell she's been in there way too long because she's high, and it's gotten a little cold, but she's like doesn't really want to get out, and she's on her phone, and it's like almost in the water, like right above the water line, and you just hear the audio, and you're in a wide, you can see I'm a DP, but you're in like a wide from like the corner, and it's kind of pathetic, and she's just holding her phone, and it's a how it's made video on potato chips, and she's just like kind of like watching it, and you know how TikToks now can get up to like 5 minutes long? Oh my God. So the first 3 minutes is just her like literally in the bath watching it, and it's just like goes to like a close up on her face with like the water line here, and it's like she's kind of all scrunched together. You can tell she's just like really high, and it's just like, and then 1 potato equals 36 chips. And then it's like, and then they go through and you see the video, and it's like goes through the processor, and it's like, and from raw potato to potato chip, you have 15 minutes. And it's like, this happened last night. And then what happens is the conflict, here we are, everyone, act 2, is she gets out of the bath. It's like quiet. She turns her phone off. I'm not good at pitching, okay? But I'm going to pitch it to you. Yeah, I'm doing great. Okay.
But I kind of feel like you're just telling me what happened last night.
Yeah. But like I pictured it while I was in the bath about it being how funny it would be if it was like a little short. And then you get up, and then you get out of the bath, and you walk, and you don't know where she's going. And she goes in the living room where her boyfriend's watching like an Oscar-nominated film after she just watched like a potato chip thing. And she sits down, and she's like, okay, I'm ready to like resolve this fight. And then it ends. And then that's my
you know what? I like that.
Tell the stories you know, and I think it would be funny. And I think I would frame it in a way where the girl would be pathetic, but also funny and relatable. And that's how I feel about myself. And I'm very excited to be hosting this season of Indiewood with you.
Well, thank you for joining me for episode 1.
You're welcome.
We'll talk about a lot of cool things next week, and the week after, and the following week after that. And thank you for joining us.
Of course. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care. Thank you for listening to the Indiewood podcast. You can find us on anywhere you find your podcasts, and on Instagram at IndiewoodPod. See you next time.